recording. Let me put stuff on silent here. And let's go. 5, 4, 3. Hey y'all, Walt's here with a presentation about memoirs. Let's go back in time. So this is like the second time I've done this. The first time I recorded it, there was no audio. It was just me looking like a crazy person, gesticulating wildly with my hands while there was no sound. Hope there's sound on this one. Anyways, here we go. I have a memoir assignment out there for you, and that's what you guys got to do. You got to write me a memoir. It's got to be short, 300 to 500 words. That's not a lot, but I want you to tell me a story about something that happened in your life and explain a lesson that you learned from it. Just like the two texts that we read, Maya Angelou's Living Well, Living Good, and Lewis Thomas's The Tucson Zoo. So let's take a look at how they did it. We can learn from the experts here. You know, Maya Angelou is a prolific writer, so is Lewis Thomas. These people knew what they were doing, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it exactly like them. So how do they start their essays? One of the typical ways we start essays as high school students is you can ask a question, you can introduce a quotation, you can introduce a big idea, like have you ever thought about how time and space are constructs of the human mind that we use to organize the world around us? And then we move on to something more specific. One of the easiest ways to do it is to ask a question. But in this case, this is a personal essay. This is something for you to write about you, and I just happen to be along for the ride. I get to read it. So you don't necessarily have to do this. So let's check out how Maya Angelou does her work here. So she starts out with Aunt T. Now, this is different than typical memoir or autobiographical piece because she starts out talking about someone else, and she introduces Aunt T as if she is a character in a novel. So we get a physical description of Aunt T here, and then we get a story. And Maya Angelou waits to include herself till all the way over here. It's the third paragraph of the essay when she starts with the word I. And even then, she still keeps on with that story about Aunt T. So that's different than a typical memoir because, this is written by Maya Angelou. It's her piece, but she's talking about someone else. So keep that in mind as you're mining your memories for your experience here. You don't necessarily have to start off the essay about you. It can be about someone else in your life that you learned a lesson from, and then you move to convey that lesson. So Angelou transitions later in the essay, when she says, that story has stayed with me for nearly 30 years, and when a tale remains fresh in my mind, it almost always contains a lesson which will benefit me. So right there, she makes a transition from storytelling to explaining, and it's explicit. It's almost like she says, here's a story I told you. Now let me tell you why this story is important. And then she moves on. Remember, this is a memoir. This is a personal essay. It doesn't necessarily have to follow the same rules of essay writing, academic essay writing, where you don't reference, you don't say I, you, that kind of stuff. So then after she tells us the story, she simply just tells us why this story is important. She makes her claim that basically living well is an art which can be developed. That's her big idea. And she goes on with how you do that. Her supports are readiness to forgive, looking to be convivial and get along with everyone, being able to take life as a gift, not expecting anything, or like rolling with the punches kind of stuff. What does she say? We are created creative. So this is where she transitions from storytelling to explaining. She makes her claim that we can live life as art, and then she explains it by going over the basic talents and the fundamentals of living life as art. Okay, let's move on to the Tucson Zoo. So he starts out with a big idea, reductionism. Science, he gets the most of its information by the process of reductionism. He then defines that. Keep that in mind. Your audience might not be into the same things you are. So if you're writing about something that is something very specific to what you do and enjoy, you might have to explain a little bit. No big deal. Anyways, he basically comes out and says, like, reductionism can be a bad thing. And let me tell you about an experience I had where reductionism was kind of a bad thing. So again, he introduces himself later, not in the first paragraph, here in the second paragraph, but it's not about him at first. So he introduces himself and he explains, okay, here's what reductionism is. Here's why it can be kind of an issue. And here's a scene, here's a story about when this happened to me. Over here, he actually lists or describes rather the physical description of the Tucson Zoo exhibit that gave him this idea. Now, he, again, just like Angelou, transitions from storytelling to explaining. It's kind of this instead me thing here. So he explains all this cool stuff. He's like, he saw the otters and beavers. He was transfixed. He didn't want to be a reductionist. He didn't want to try to think, okay, well, in order to truly understand why I like otters and beavers, I need to know what makes them tick. He says, no, I wasn't a reductionist about them. I was a reductionist about me. So then he states his claim over here. Basically, his claim is human beings are coded. We are endowed with genes that code out our reaction to stuff. That's his big claim. But then he moves on and kind of refines it. And he kind of shows how this is kind of, that kind of relates to us on a almost daily or personal level, where he says usefulness may turn out to be the hardest test of fitness for survival, more important than aggression. Basically, he's saying that we hanker for friends. That was a key line in the essay. So he's basically saying what he learned about his experience with otters and beavers is that he doesn't want to be a reductionist about everything. He does begin to wonder about humanity's relationship with each other, and he thinks that we are coded for friendship. We're coded for usefulness and helpfulness, not necessarily as like a sweet kind of thing, but basically saying like the human beings have survived as a species because we are coded for altruism, because we are coded for friendship and usefulness and helpfulness. So what do we take away from this? Use these as models. Set the scene. Tell me a story. You can introduce a character. And again, this isn't like a fact-checkable kind of thing. Your memory is what you're basing this off of. It's a memoir. So set the scene. Tell a story. It doesn't necessarily have to be a story about you. It could be a story about someone else. But you gotta transition to explaining. You gotta make your claim. What are you trying to say about the world? Based on what the experience that you had or the experience that was relayed in your story. Just add your support, your anecdotal evidence. Tell me why you think that. Yeah, sounds simple when I lay it out like that, but I know it's complicated. Remember, something is better than nothing. First, this could be a first, second, third draft kind of thing. Because again, this is something I want you to carry with you. This is, your life has meaning and value, and this is a chance for you to kind of explore that. So it could be something big and monumental, or it could be something as simple as going to the zoo that teaches you a lesson. Yeah. If you have any questions, let me know. Hope you guys have a good one. We'll talk to you again soon.